special 1-hour discussion on what I call the terror boat mystery. Was it in fact a terrorist-related incident, or is it, as many people increasingly in free papers at least are now beginning to suspect, that it was more connected to smuggling? Let me put the smuggling case to you, Mr. Banerjee. It's made on the front page of today's Indian Express by Praveen Swami. He'll be joining us in a moment's time. And his front page story says that the boat that got burnt was a 25-foot vessel named Qalandar, captained by a certain Yaqoob Baloch, a resident of Liari, which is a gangster-infested part of Karachi, and that this organization is linked A, to Pakistan's drug mafia, and secondly, to a certain Mir Yaqoob Bizenjo, who seems to be quite infamous for smuggling narcotics and alcohol. Do you accept that the wealth of detail given by Praveen Swami suggests that the case for saying this is smuggling related rather than terror related is actually quite strong?
Well, it's plausible. It hinges on, I've seen the report, it hinges on whether the missing boat owner who appears or does not appear, his mother has been questioned and she said, well, such absences are common. Of course, Liari has been known for, you know, these Baloch cartels which have been involved in smuggling. First of liquor in the mid 70s, late 70s, even after that moved on to drugs, and drugs from Afghanistan going out. All this has been there. This is well known. At the same time, you see, there has been an excess of criminals and politics in Liari. You have the MQM versus the PPP going on, and you know, previously Rahman Baloch, So
are you coming around to agreeing and accepting with Praveen?
No, I'm not. I'm not yet accepting it, but it could be. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's a plausible theory, but it would hinge on discovering the actual crew members, whether they were from this gang or not.
In fact, Praveen Swami's article suggests possible names for the other 3 crew members. One is named, the captain, as Yaqoob Baloch. The other 3 we only have aliases or names for, but those aren't confirmed. In other words, you're saying we need more evidence,
yes,
but this is a plausible, credible theory.
Yes, but of course you have to take also the fact that, you know, if there are explosives consignment, then there is a history of...
we don't know if there is.
Yes,
we don't know.
There is a history of, you know, transshipment into, you know, Gujarat coast, 1993, the Mumbai...
Ajay Shukla, let me bring you in at this point. After your story came out in the Business Standard yesterday, there is Praveen Swami's story in the Indian Express today, naming the boat, naming the captain, linking it to Pakistan's drug mafia, linking it to Mir Yaqoob Bizenjo, who's infamous for being involved in smuggling alcohol and drugs. Do you now come to the conclusion, even if tentatively, that this was more of a smuggling related rather than a terror related incident?
Karan, I think it would be fair to say that I have not come to any conclusion and not ruled out anything. But the weight of the evidence definitely appears to suggest that this is some kind of a smuggling operation. There just wasn't enough proof to show that this was a terrorist attack. There were no weapons on board or have been recovered. The explosives on board seem to have disappeared without a trace, no signs of any burning. These people seem to have conveniently committed suicide. I mean, to me, with my knowledge of how security forces operate, I would say that the weight of evidence appears to suggest that this was a gung-ho operation occasioned by the fact that there should never be another 2611, and that the Coast Guard appears to have overreacted and therefore done what it had to. One can understand what it is, one can leave one's mind open to other alternatives or other theories, but the weight of the evidence is in this favor right now.
Very quickly, because I now have Praveen Swami with me. He is the Strategic Affairs Editor of the Indian Express and the author of that seminal front page article in the Indian Express today. Praveen, I'll just recap for the audience what in fact your article says, that the boat that got burnt was a 25-foot vessel called Qalandar, captained by a certain Yaqoob Baloch, a resident of Liari, which is a gangster-infested part of the Pakistani city Karachi, allegedly linked to the drug mafia in Pakistan, and a certain Mir Yaqoob Bizenjo, who's famous or infamous for being involved in the smuggling of alcohol and drugs. How sure are you of these details?
As reasonably sure as we can be, we made, as is the common practice at major newspapers, multiple checks. We actually met Yaqub Baloch's mother. We spoke to a variety of sources on both sides of the border. My colleague Ali Chishti met with a wide range of people with knowledge of and contacts within the drug trade. We're not criminal investigators, though we're journalists. I can't actually haul anyone into a room and cross-examine them. I'm not privy to the vast troves of communications intelligence the defense minister is privy to. But as your last guest pointed out, there are some quite significant questions. And the defense minister himself today not shedding a great deal of light on those questions. He said, for example, that he did not believe there were smugglers because smugglers didn't commit suicide. That is supposition at best. He spoke of communications but didn't seem to say very much on whether these communications had anything to do with a terrorist group or with a planned act of terrorism. This debate we perhaps wouldn't be having if it wasn't for the initial claims coming from party figures linked to the government saying that this was some kind of 26/11 attack. Given the seriousness of that claim, given that this was a horrific terror attack, I think every citizen would like to know exactly what happened, whether this was a genuine attack or whether this was instead some sort of effort to gain political capital from a not very competently executed raid against a boat carrying drugs or some other contraband.
All right, but you believe that the information on your front page is the best possible information and the best possible theory for what this boat was, who was on the boat, and what its mission and purpose was. Give me a quick confirmation of that, and then I'll bring the politicians in.
Absolutely, and please note that the defense minister today has again spoken of illicit activity. I don't think anyone would use the phrase illicit activity to describe an act of terrorism which led to the death of of almost 200 people, which is what 26/11 was.
Let me bring in the two politicians, Randeep Singh Surjewala speaking on behalf of the Congress Party, GVL Narasimha Rao speaking on behalf of the BJP and presumably the government as well. Mr. Surjewala, on Saturday, your spokesperson Ajay Kumar said the government asked the government how it had come to the conclusion that this was a terrorist boat. Now, in the light of all that since emerged, the many question marks that we've just gone through in great detail, have your doubts grown? And are your questions tonight even more demanding?
Mr. Thapar, let me begin by saying that as citizens of India and as a principal opposition party, it is our right to ask questions which are in public realm for the government. That does not make people asking questions Pakistanis, as my friends from BJP have termed many such people. The simple point is, Bharatiya Janata Party holds a press conference claiming bravado for preventing a 26/11 terrorist attack. Very well, I am equally concerned. However, the Defence Ministry press release does not use the word terror. It says the boat occupants set themselves on fire. The Defence Ministry is unable to say who the occupants were, which terrorist organization or Pakistani authorities, if any, are involved. Government of India lodges no protest with the Pakistani government. Prime Minister keeps completely silent. Defense Minister speaks 3 days after the incident. Yesterday, Foreign Minister holds a press conference but chooses not to speak about the incident. What is happening? We are concerned about issues of national security. Government must come out with a categorical statement, and if there was indeed a terror threat, there must be serious bilateral protest.
Okay.
Prime Minister must come forward and say how the national security is being protected and how terrorists will hereafter be thwarted from doing such terror attacks. And if it was only a PR exercise, government must concede that there are plausible questions which Parveen, others have put in public realm. They must be answered by the government.
Very quickly before I go to GVL Narasimha Rao, I want to bring you in at that point and raise with you, Mr. Pal, two quick things that were pointed out there by Randeep Singh Surjewala, that A, the government has not protested to Pakistan about this, B, Sushma Swaraj, the foreign minister, holds a press conference and doesn't discuss this or take any issues on this. C, the prime minister, who's extremely good at communicating, particularly on Twitter, is silent. Does that, as he suggests, raise certain doubts and question marks? Otherwise, the government, I presume, would have been much more vociferous in taking this up with Pakistan.
I suppose the government is treading cautiously, because normally you would raise it as a protest with a foreign government when you are absolutely sure of your facts.
Which means they're not absolutely sure.
I would imagine so. I mean, as your other guests have pointed out, even the language of the Defense Ministry's own communique.
Illicit, you mean?
Illicit. So I suspect if it's smuggling, ultimately, that is not something you protest about.
So you're agreeing that the government's failure or reluctance to formally take up the matter with Pakistan, the foreign minister's silence on the subject, even though she holds a press conference, add to the question marks?
It certainly shows that the government is being cautious, which is a good thing.
Let me bring you in at that point, Mr. Narasimha Rao. The defense minister today, speaking to reporters, said, and I'm quoting him, "I think they were suspected terrorists," mark that word, suspected terrorists, "as they committed suicide. A normal boat carrying drugs can surrender." Now, first of all, that's not a very definitive statement that they were terrorists and this is terrorist related. You know, when he says suspected, he's only sharing his suspicion, nothing more. And secondly, the whole thing hinges on the claim that they committed suicide. But you've actually heard Ajay Shukla point out that if they were going to commit suicide and they had explosives, they'd have blown themselves up. They wouldn't have chosen to do it in the slow, painful way of setting a boat on fire, which takes a lot longer. So I put it to you, is the defense minister clutching at straws because he wants to protect the good name either of the NTRO or the Coast Guard? And he doesn't want to admit that the analysis done by the NTRO was missing and wrong, and that the Coast Guard as a result overreacted.
Let me make a few statements before I answer your question. Randeep was saying, the Congress spokespersons repeatedly are saying there was a press conference from the BJP. Let me nail their lie. There was no press conference from the BJP that was held until your spokespersons came out and made very absolutely, I think, unacceptable propositions. So there was no statement. The BJP spokespersons talked about a possible terror link, a possible 2611 kind of an operation. And that is what even the defense minister had stated today. That has been the official position of the government and the party consistently from the time.
Mr. Narasimha, you're using the same tentative language as the defense minister, a possible, and I'm underlining that word, possible terror link, which means you're also not sure this is terror related. It's quite possible it may not be terror related, it may be smuggling related.
I think, Karan, but the kind of the intelligence inputs, intercepts that have been picked up, the fact that these people, the people on the boat, were in touch with the Pakistani establishment, the security forces, the Pakistani army, that does not suggest a normal smuggling operation. And these half-baked reports in the media, I have no hesitation in saying so, just to show their own heroism, I think is only causing great disservice to the country. But as journalists, they have a right to do it.
Well,
but I
don't think it's disservice to the country. I think asking questions and demanding answers is a service to the country, the greatest service, because getting at the truth is what journalism is about. So I'm going to stop you when you start suggesting that asking questions is disservice to the country. That's not the case. But that answer, Praveen Swami, hinges on the fact that the so-called transcripts Mr. Narasimha Rao just mentioned are credible. Do you know anything about these transcripts which claim that people on this boat were talking to Pakistan's maritime agency? Mr. Narasimha Rao even suggested they were talking to the Pakistan army, but that's the first time I've heard that one. Are those credible transcripts or are these being made up at this point? Quickly, Praveen Swami.
We've heard a variety of claims coming mainly from the media that these individuals were in touch with Pakistan's maritime forces, but who they were in touch with and how the government believes them to be persons in maritime, in the Pakistani maritime establishment, we do not know. I cannot for the life of me understand the reason for secrecy here, because whoever in Pakistan was doing the talking would know what they said. The government knows what they said. So somehow why the public shouldn't also get to know this and make an informed judgment on the facts, I cannot understand. But the second thing here, Karan, is that if the government has any evidence in its possession that these people meant harm to India and were in touch with Pakistan's military in some manner, that then compounds the gravity of the terrorism and surely makes it all the more imperative that the government have protested in the strongest possible terms with the government of Pakistan, which it has not done.
Absolutely. Let me stop you there.
This defense becomes very confusing.
I have a former High Commissioner to Pakistan sitting with me. If we do have intercepts, as Mr. Narasimha Rao claimed, that connects this boat to people in the Pakistan Army, not just the Maritime Security Agency, would we not have protested?
It would certainly be unusual not to. In the past, we would certainly have protested extremely vociferously.
All right, it's a very diplomatically phrased answer. It would certainly be unusual not to. In the past, we would have done so vociferously. Very quickly, Mr. Surjewala, the Defence Minister went one step further. He also said, and I'm quoting him, "My interpretation is that Pakistan is trying to divert attention after what happened in Peshawar." Do you buy that?
Well, Mr. Thapar, if Defence Minister of the country says so based on some information, I am more concerned about why Government of India is taking no action. If there was actionable intelligence and if there was connection with Pakistan Army, as my learned friend from Bharatiya Janata Party has just disclosed for the first time on your show, then should the Prime Minister of the country keep quiet for 5 days and Defence Minister speak after 3 days? Should Government of India not call the High Commissioner of Pakistan immediately? Should the issue not be taken up bilaterally? Should the issue not be taken at international fora if need be? And should proper preventive action not be immediately put in place to ensure that a repeated terror attack of this nature, as my friend from BJP is saying, does not take place? But Government of India is completely mum and Defence Minister is not even sure.
Let's give the gentleman you called your friend from the BJP
must come out and clarify the whole issue.
Let me bring in your friend from the BJP, as you call him. Mr. Narasimha Rao, you've revealed something that no one knew, and I hope you're correct when you make that claim and you're not simply guessing or getting it wrong, that in fact intercepts suggest that the people on the boat were in touch with the Pakistan Army. If that is correct, and you haven't made a mistake, then it's extremely surprising that the government hasn't A, vociferously protested to Pakistan, B, that they haven't taken this up with other international countries, including in particular America, because those would be serious lapses if they hadn't, and secondly, a break with their past, because you've got a former High Commissioner here telling me that if it was the case that we have connected this to the Pakistan Army, we'd have protested very loudly. So why are we silent?
Have we got any response? Has the Pakistan accepted they were responsible for 26/11? 6 years after this incident had happened?
Have
they
you
accepted
forgotten
even
that there
today?
is a case, even if
They
it's
have never,
dragging
they
its
have
way
never
through the
accepted.
courts, it's
I think
actually
that
being
is
held in
not the
Pakistan?
priority.
You've forgotten that Pakistan has got
No, that's
7
a
people
farce.
under arrest.
No, that's a farce. We don't see that as a
But hang on a
genuine
second.
trial.
Come back
That's
to
a
my
farce.
question. If you genuinely believe,
So
and
I'm
I'm
asking
saying
you
it
a
again,
question,
that you
so-
haven't made a mistake, that there are intercepts that connect us to the Pakistan Army, should you not have protested to Pakistan?
Karan, until the whole investigation is completed, all the facts are available, exact individuals who were on the boat or is not available, why are we jumping the gun?
Well, we'll never
So
know
far,
who was
the
on board the
government
boat
had
because they're
not
dead and their
stated for
bodies haven't
sure.
been found. Very quickly, Mr. Commodore Bhaskar.
One can easily find out who they
You've
are.
been seeing right up till now the government version as the version you want to go with, although you've acknowledged there are other versions as well, but you wanted to give primary importance to the government version. Now when you hear Mr. Narasimha Rao say, and I hope he's correct when he makes that claim, that in fact intercepts connect us to the Pakistan Army, are you surprised that the government hasn't taken this up officially with the Pakistanis? Certainly Mr. Pal, a former High Commissioner, is deeply surprised by the government's silence. A quick answer.
A quick answer is that I think the government is perhaps still trying to put together whatever information they have and whatever evidence this Coast Guard ship may have brought back. But I think a larger issue, Karan, if I may quickly add, which causes me great concern, is that we have now arrived at a situation in the public debate in India where it is being suggested that an armed force of the country, the Coast Guard, is acting in a certain manner which would advance a given political objective of a government or a party. I think that's a very sad
no,
day
I
for
don't
us
think that's what
when
we're
we make
suggesting.
such.
Forgive me, I'm interrupting you there. I don't think anyone's suggesting that the Coast Guard has acted deliberately to advance the political interests of the BJP. What we're suggesting is that the Coast Guard may have badly or wrongly analyzed and overreacted, but not necessarily.
Karan, I heard the word PR setup. You know, whoever may have.
I don't know
used
who
it,
made that
this
either,
was
because I didn't hear that.
orchestrated.
I didn't hear that, so
But I
let's not
think
get
that
into
was
that. Very quickly,
a very
my
sad
last word
moment.
to Ajay Shukla, who's raised his finger. In 10 seconds, Ajay, because we'll be out of time.
Karan, very one simple broad point. This whole point scoring, name calling, where everybody who contests the official version is labeled as an agent of Pakistan. It's happening on Twitter, it's happening on Facebook. I just want to point out this is what happens in Pakistan, where any questioning of the security establishment is seen as done at the instigation of India, and you're labeled as anti-national.
Ajay,
surely
we're
we are
out of
not
time.
becoming like Pakistan, I hope.
That's a very good note on which to end. Raising questions, even if they're awkward and embarrassing, is not just the job of journalists, but in addition, it is the job and duty and commitment of those who want to know the truth. And the truth is what we all strive to find out. We may not succeed, but it's what we strive to find out. And it's in that interest that we raise questions, even if they sometimes embarrass us as a country, leave aside our government as a group. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. Clearly, these are issues that are going to reverberate and haunt us for a while to come.